Hi everyone, welcome to our 29th Masterclass. Today we're going to be continuing the series that we've been building over the last two lessons in non-photorealistic rendering. So this is covering sort of cartoony rendering. Now we've got some reference images that we've been pulling and referencing before. I'm actually not going to reference those today specifically, just because I think we're going to try and build something up organically and we know the theme that we're looking at. We've been building our shaders and materials towards that theme, and I think we can take it from here. If not, we'll duck back to reference images, but for the moment we're not. So one of the key things that I want to cover today is that we've built this shader that produces nice looking cartoony-ish graphics at a consistent resolution over the previous two classes. But one of the things you don't want to have to do is build a whole bunch of content specifically for use with that shader. Now you could do that, but it's a lot of work and there is a lot of existing 3D models and textures that we're going to try and repurpose towards what we're going to do. To that end, I've got 3 packs of content that I'm going to be testing with today. All of them come off the Unity Asset Store. I have the cartoony post-apocalyptic pack from manufacturer K4. I have another 2 packs, and we'll come down to those. There's a modular city and alley pack, and I apologize, I can't remember the exact author of that one, but I'll try and dig it up as we get into that one. And there's another one that's another streetscape pack. And this is all lining up with the original reference images we used in the previous two classes. Now, the reason I picked those 3 assets is that one of them is close to the style. It is already cartoony. It's just missing the finer details that we're adding in shading. The second 2 are more realistic assets, and we're going to actually do some tricks in Photoshop to actually convert them into line maps that can be used in conjunction with what we've already built. So with that in mind, I'm just going to flip over to Unity. One quick thing I did notice last week, now this is just where we were last week, I realized after the fact that actually ramping up the ambient color of the scene, this is in the window lighting, gives us a much more definitive look that comes closer to what we're looking for. And as you can see here, this is fairly flat as we want it, but if we make the material metallic, we do actually still get the impacts and effects we want. So we can make something smooth and shiny, and that still looks kind of cartoony, but it still also looks the way we have been building the shader towards. So that's just as a quick reference, as a continuation from the previous lesson. So I'm going to start with the post-apocalyptic set, and as you can see here, we're just going to pull in some of these buildings. We've already got some stylization here. It's not quite the same though as what we've been building. As you can see here, there is actual detail painted into the textures, lots of other bits and pieces like that. This is probably not going to convert particularly well just because of how much is coming down on the textures. To really get into this, we would probably need to build 4 texture maps. We might adapt the shader to consider that. We'll sort of see where we go today. But one of the things is that we've got quite a bit in here. Okay, so I'm going to start with getting the base color map and see if we can find something that would produce the kind of line art we want. This looks pretty close to what we want, so I'm just going to grab that one, and we're going to take this into Photoshop. Right, this was building Atlas 1. And we'll take a second to come up. So if you remember from the first class, one of the things we did was we built these line map textures. Whoa, computer is running very slow all of a sudden. Probably Photoshop's fault. One of the things we built was these line map textures, which are in fact what's called a signed distance field. They just measure the distance from the actual highlighted points as a grayscale map, so the grey being the actual distance from the points. Now, grab here, and one of the things we're going to do is I'm just going to start editing these live, because I've got these off the asset store. I can just simply replace them if we don't like them. So I'm going to actually filter this first. And you'll have to forgive me, my computer is running a little bit slowly for some reason. So we're just going to find edges. Kind of works. So what I'll do is I'm just going to take that into grayscale. And basically it does what we want. So I'm just going to invert this. So now we've got the distance, and finally, I'm going to use the levels. I'm just going to use auto levels, and that way we brighten it up a bit. Okay, That's going to give us what we want. So I'm going to, in fact, I might even raise the contrast on this. So I'll just do a quick contrast adjustment. I just want to get this sort of very clearly black and white. I don't really want shades of grey in here because that's going to mess up our line art. So I'm just going to raise the contrast. The legacy mode has a much better impact at getting to pure black and white. So I'm going to lower the brightness. Okay. It does not matter too much that this is getting a bit nasty in the effects. What matters is that we've got this, roughly speaking, black and white. Okay, so I've taken that, and I'm going to copy and paste this into a channel. So I'm just going to create a new channel. The keyboard shortcuts might be different between various operating systems, so I'm not 100% sure how to do this on another operating system. But if you hold down Control on Windows, you can convert your alpha channel in a channel to a selection. I'm just going to delete that channel now that I've selected it, so it doesn't become an RGB thing. And I'm just going to create a new layer here. I'm just going to create a fill layer down here that is pure black. Well, we've got this one. So this is our layer. Now, if you remember from the very first lesson, we produced the sign distance field here using the outer glow. We set the mode to precise, reduce the spread to 0, and now we've got what we're looking for. I'm going to reduce the size a bit. We do want more size than less, but we just also want to make sure the details are preserved. So we'll say 20 pixels there. Hope that that will do the job. So I'm just going to save this. And we'll tab back to Unity. And our thing, as soon as we refresh the project, should look rather ugly. Okay, definitely looks rather ugly, but we'll switch this over to our shader now. So we've just got this, what do we call this? Custom NPR outline. So just got a custom NPR outline. Okay, and now we just need to fill in a few of these things. In fact, I've got these quite wrong. This is our in sunlight versus not in sunlight. Fine, we've got our line art. Okay, now this is doing what it's supposed to, but we just need to adjust a few settings. Like on here, we've got a few things we just need to poke. So I'm going to lower the smoothness, and we've got our fast scale is probably going to be 20. Nope, maybe it's not. Okay, that to me looks about right. It's probably even a little bit too obvious. This is far more cartoony than we want, and also our scales need a little bit of adjustment too. So up close, the near scale I'm going to set to 0.5, maybe 4. Just trying to get that right. So just have to keep poking at these settings until we get quite the look we're looking for. It's not quite right, but we're getting closer. That to me looks about right. So now, as you can see, as we get close, we've got nice line art. As we get further back, the line art remains fairly crisp, but does eventually disappear. Maybe not quite eventually disappear there, but still, we've got the basics there. And the good thing is that this particular building structure, it does use a separate atlas texture, and we'll probably just take this one in and do exactly the same process. We'll just take this with Photoshop, same process. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to record a macro, because we'll be able to redo this quickly and easily this way. No, I need to remember how to do this. It's in actions, isn't it? Yep. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder. We'll call this one the line art. Now I'll just start recording this one here. This one should do the job. Okay, so first things first, we converted this with a simple find edges. So to stylize, find edges. We're going to lower the saturation down to 0. We're going to invert, and now we're going to play with the contrast, brightness and contrast. And we'll use the legacy system, pull this one right up. Cool. Select all, copy, create a new alpha channel, load the selection, delete the channel. Fill, and apply our outer glow. Finally, I'll just add a I might just lower this one a little bit. No, 20 was fine. We can always tweak it in the shader. Okay, and I'm going to stop recording. So now I can just quickly do that to a whole directory worth of files if we need to. Right. Okay, we'll just swap that out with our outline shader. One of the things I will definitely want to do is change these default colors. Okay, now, going back to our original references, the colors were quite a bit softer, so we'll probably play with these a little bit, but I'm just going to drop a few of these buildings in because they should all be using the same materials, and if that's all set up right, we should be automatically good to go here. Just wanted to poke at a couple of these. Indeed we will. So this materials, again, we'll just need to sort of set up a few of these materials as is. And we're about to upgrade to Unity 2018.2, and one of the very cool things about it is the ability to cut and paste shader properties from one to the other, which will be quite nice when it actually comes through. Okay. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start filling this in a little bit with some colour. So we'll go for something a little bit more homely. So we'll pull in some we're going with subtle here as well. So even these lines, we're going to this is shadows, so we want quite a bit darker on our shadows. Good. Okay, and finally, our line art. Again, I won't give this too much influence. We'll just really be quite minor with the changes on that. So I feel like a lot of this is down to the subtlety of the original source material. It's quite subtle with its use of colors. Now, I'm not 100% convinced about this screen space gradient. We might switch this to a world space gradient. And what I might do there is we'll just poke up this shader. Now we've messed with this shader quite a bit. This is just one of those things that we want to tweak it until we get it right. So the first thing we'll do is we'll switch this from using the screen space coordinates, we'll switch to using world space coordinates. And the basics of that means that right now we're using the sort of the X and the Y of the position on the screen, whereas we're going to change this to the position of the pixel in 3D space. And there's a couple of quick ways we can do this. The fastest way is we just go into our input structure, and Unity has a couple of sort of well-known structures that it will recognize and insert for you automatically, and one of them is the world pos structure. I'll just give it a second to boot all up. Okay, so I'm just going to double check our Vertex Shader, because the Vertex Shader may need to do something here, but I don't think it will. Yes, correct. It's using this Unity initialize output, which means that it'll add the stuff automatically if we add it to this array. So we'll just do a float 3 world pos, and that means that we've got the world position. And where we used the screen pos before, I'm just going to grab that from here, screen UV. So we'll just make this a half. So we'll go push a float y equals screen UV.y. And we're just going to do this so we can swap this all in. Okay, and that should make no change to the shader whatsoever. Perfect. So now we're going to swap the y to the world pos. So to do this, we're just going to change that with in.worldpos.y. Now notice this will probably produce a very thick band towards the bottom. Yep, there we go. And it'll come out towards the top. There's two reasons for this. One, we haven't clamped it, so that's the first thing we need to do. And to do that, we just use a saturate command. That locks it to the values between 0 and 1. Because what we're having at the top is we're getting multiples of the coordinate, and the interpolation's going a little bit haywire. So here we go. Now we've got the gradient occurring on the lowest meter only. So to get that to go higher, we're just going to divide that by 20, and that should means it'll give us 20 meters worth of height on the gradient. There we go. And now as we drag this building up and down, we'll see the gradient has an effect. But as we move the screen around, the colors are going to remain constant. And that's probably going to look a bit better overall, I think, because it'll give it a bit more consistency. So if you did dig back to the source images, and maybe we'll do that in a second, we can, you'll see there's some sort of distinction and similarity here. One of the other things that we want to play with is that we want to get the special effects right. So what we're doing here is interesting, but it's not really going to be sort of selling the scene. It's certainly interesting, and you'll certainly be curious about it if you sort of hop into a scene like this, but it's not going to wow you on its own. It's good, but not great. And to get up that sort of great level is we're going to start bringing in some of the more sophisticated parts of Unity, integrate them into our environment here. So what I might do is I'm just going to start playing with these particular elements. We might increase the smoothness on these, might make them metallic. Didn't quite, those stick out a bit too much, so I'll just bring those back down. But what we could do is looking at adding some things like reflection into this environment. So I'm just going to create a water. Now, the fun thing is we can actually take this and you are something wrong. That's better. In fact, I might drop the scale on this one. I might need to add the displacement stuff actually into the non-photorealistic shader. So I might start a little bit simpler. I'll start with a simple cylinder. I'll set the size to 50. No, that's too big. 20, 20, and leave that as 1. I'll knock the collider off here. I'm just going to grab this material just because it already exists. And we'll make a water as well. Where's our reflection probes? Let's see how this looks. Might need to set some things static too, I just realized. If it doesn't show in the reflection probe reflection, then we do need to set things static. Okay, that's better. One of the things we'll notice is this reflection's not quite lining up with the environment, as you can see. And one of the tricks of getting around that is to switch to box projection, which will create a more specific reflection there. We may even want to switch to actually using real computed reflections here. That's a little bit more tricky in terms of what it sets the CPU back by. So you got to be a little bit careful when you do it. But I think the effect there might be worth it. So you might just want to play with this one a little bit, I think. The other issue there is that the reflection is being tinted by the water quite a bit. So we need to probably make that a fairly neutral color. And again, we just play with the scales until we get the sort of effects we want with the lineup. Ideally, we'll just sort of have some waves reveal on the surface there as you get close, but as you get further away, it sort of stays away. Okay, so this covers the basics of converting something that was already kind of cartoony, but the same technique actually works on more complex pieces as well. So I'm just grabbing this pack as well. And if I grab some wall prefabs, we should be able to get some. So these are quite fine pieces. Hopefully there's a conglomeration I can just grab that's got a few buildings or something attached to it. I don't really feel like filling out the whole thing one by one. Let's have a quick look. Okay, this one might be a bit too piecemeal for us to be able to do this effectively. I can convert a couple of individual files, but overall that's probably not going to be a very satisfying conversion. So I'm just going to pull up one of the other packs that I've got in here, and hopefully we can find one that gives us something we want to. Here we go, town construction. So pre-built prefabs, that sounds perfect. Ah! So, this is actually a great one because it's quite noisy. So this will probably represent a pretty worst case scenario for conversions. What I'll do is I'll just grab the materials there. As you can see, they're already on that list, which is good. Let's open this one in Photoshop. And let's run our macro. So I'm just going to hit play. And because this one's quite a fine detail, I'm just going to lower this outer glow one a little bit. Okay, and we'll just set this one to a custom NPR outline shader. And any minute Unity will finish importing this asset. Any minute now. It's probably a 4K texture. Incidentally, the bigger your textures go, the worse the import performance gets. Fairly obvious, but it is a geometric change. And I'm not 100% sure how big this is, but it's big enough. Yeah, it's a 4K texture. That's not too bad. Okay, there we go. So we've got our texture imported in. So I'm just going to do the same thing we did before a moment ago. We'll just set this down to low. Low. And finally, okay. So as I said, this texture does represent a pretty worst case scenario, and the reason for that is that the original texture was quite noisy. If we go dig into the actual, we can't now, not unless I go all the way back through our history, which I could do. Oops, wrong one. If we dig sort of into the pixels, you'll find there's quite a bit of sort of noise that has been superimposed on here, and that's pretty typical on textures that were pre-PBR. This one clearly is. So what we'll do is we'll just go through the process ourselves manually. I'm just going to jump to, I'll run through, I think I can pause there, can't I? Yeah, I'm just going to run this through, and I'll let that poke around with it. So I'm going to increase the contrast a bit. I'm going to lower the brightness a bit more on this one. That should hopefully help. We do still end up with some areas like this that are quite going to be noisy, and that's, unless we actually repaint the texture, we're probably going to be stuck with that. Still, hopefully that will improve the situation. So I've just saved that. And again, we'll just have to wait a minute for this to import. Now there's some other ways we can produce these line art textures. I'm probably not going to go into those today, but taking these 3D models into something like Substance Painter will give you a lot of options for producing the line art programmatically. You should be able to get some good results from there. But the best is if it's a crisp, clean texture to begin with. So we're probably going to be stuck with that for our textures. Now that's probably not ideal, and we will probably better improve that a bit just by merging the color sets. So we'll just merge that one with that one, that one with that one, that one with that one, that one with that one. And now there's no details at all, but what we can do is we can reduce this very slightly. Because it is worth noting that the reference images we've been looking at in particular are quite subtle, and they don't have a lot of detail to them. They rely a lot on shadowing for those details, so we'll just focus more on actually getting the shadows in. do that, I'm just going to... So that's a bit closer. We'll just give this a little bit of an edge. And that would fit a bit closer towards what we've already got. In fact, I might just decrease this one a little bit as well. There we go. Not quite perfect, but certainly that would fit in to our existing existing designs, and then we can just drag and drop more of these into the scenes as we go to sort of lay out our environments. Let's see if I've got any neon writing in here, because I think that might add to this if we sort of highlight off some bits that are more detailed than others. Unfortunately, not really. So I'm going to take that out of the picture at the moment. I'm going to focus mainly on this pack because I think it fit better with the theme. So we'll just go off and build the basics of a structure, basics of a region, and then we can take it. See what we can do about baking lighting, because I think that might be a good exercise to take next. For this one, we may want to look at building a masked texture, and the reason we want to consider that is just because these windows, we probably don't want to lose those to the flat color. We still want to keep some detail there. So I'm just going to have a look at this. Actually has come with a masks already, and hopefully that is, in fact, what we're looking for. Maybe. It does seem like the window textures, though, are pretty distinctly put there. So what I might do is I might just pull this one open. This is Building Atlas 2. And we'll just run through our conversion. Leave the defaults there. They look pretty good. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add an alpha channel here. And that alpha channel is going to be mapped to just this section here. If I recall correctly, it was here and here. If you're following along at home, you may want to keep a copy of your textures just so you're not blindsided by which bits are which. I'm going to create an alpha channel here, and we're actually going to use the alpha channel for a change now because I'm going to add a tint to the shader that is an optional field. Okay, and again, just going to swap to our outline shader. So as we can see, that even though our colours are not particularly fantastic here, and we will need to poke it. I think these values all right. It's always the hard bit. Right, so as I said, the main issue here is the windows aren't really showing through. Now what we've got here in the alpha channel now is we've got this sort of quick mask, and what we'll do with that is we'll add our shader. So I'm just going to go into the shader and I'm going to add one more set of colors. Actually, I'm going to not even add one more set of colors, I'm just going to add one color. So I'm just going to add a tint, background alpha tint. And as I said last week, we will in fact release these shaders, so you can poke around with them yourself. You aren't restricted to just environments here. If you want to make clothing or other items that use a similar technique, you are more than welcome to. So just declare that there, and I'm just going to make this into the background color. So where's the background? So we've got our background here, and I'm just going to put this one times look. Hello one. We lerp that. That means linear interpolate. We're just going to do that by the texture. Where is it? Ooh. C.A, which means grabbing the alpha channel of the texture. The texture is declared there into C. Well, apparently these guys had an alpha channel, and wow, that actually looks really cool. I didn't quite expect that. A little bit unsure why that's I'm going to have to look at that. It's quite a impressive thing. No, there's no alpha channel now. In fact, I'm kind of curious about that. I think because there's no alpha channel, it's in fact assuming that the alpha channel is entirely white, in which case we'll need to just change the way that shader works. So we'll go from being C-A to 1.0 minus C-A. Then we'll just need to invert the texture map on the other one. Okay, so I'm just going to invert the texture map on this one, on the alpha channel. I think that's this one, yep. And now it's just simply going to store the areas that are normal colored. Okay, and last thing is I think we need to just align our settings here. I think the line map textures actually might only be covering the, just double check this. Edges of both. Although that is a cool technique, so I might mess with expanding that one. There we go. Maybe not the best looking of the structures, but also a lot of that is coming down to the line colors we're using. And we could probably improve our workflow a bit here by adding some tints so that the lines could inherit from the background colors just with a tint applied to it. Depending on the effects you're trying to achieve, that might be a good strategy. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take some of that color we had on the previous one, because I thought that looked really good, And we're just going to mirror that effect by multiplying. So it was the background. Have to give me Unity's running a little bit slow. Probably running too many copies of it all at once. And streaming at the same time is probably not helping. Okay, there we go. We're back. Right, so we've got our dark bottom. So what I might do is I'm just going to take this into the feeling what, yeah, that's how we would have done it. So it looks quite cool. That actually gave us a much more dramatic look. So it is worth playing around with the colors too. So I'm just going to run through the same process here. This is Atlas Snow 3. We'll probably eventually have to go through all of them, so I may as well. Right. And if I grab the original, we do have windows which are just over here. So just keep an eye on that. I'm just keeping an eye on that so we can do the same thing we did on the previous image. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this a far easier process. I'm just going to save these colors. Makes life easier. Right, those are saved, so we'll just paste these into here one at a time. A little tedious, but it'll do the job. And 0.98 and 0.52. 0.98 and 0.52. So that fits in there, except now I've got the ability to tint this window into something else. And as an added bonus, we can still create light sources. So I'm going to create some hard light sources and increase the range of this. And there we go. Now I've sort of successfully hybridized having non-photorealistic rendering while still maintaining the ability to actually get some sort of lighting effects into the environment. We can play around with this a lot more. Baked lighting will work pretty well in this environment, I think. Next stops. One of the things we could do is we could adapt the shader to do a simple outline effect. I have thought about that, but I might do that through post, and that will be next week's topic, is writing your own custom post effects. One of the things we've very recently added, and it's in the 9b28 viewers, is the ability to add custom commander buffers to the camera, and that's going to open the doors to a whole bunch of crazy effects, which we are definitely going to dive straight into. But for now, what I might do is just think about ways we can make this look even better. I might just play with some of these smoothers and metallic values and things, and just try and make some bits pop. In fact, we might leave those there. Okay, I'm going to continue building this out then for the remaining couple of minutes we've got left on our class here, and hopefully we can come up with some good ideas. Actually, what we will do is we're going to change the background shader. That is going to be one that's quite a good one to dig into. So one of the things when you're editing the Skybox shaders is that Skybox shaders are very special, and they are special in the quite annoying definition of the word special. So I'm just going to grab the built-in shaders for 2017. Just going to grab those ones. We're just going to go into an existing Skybox shader. So when you're working with Skyboxes, there's a couple of rules that need to happen, and it's easier just to adapt off an existing Skybox shader than it is to try and figure out what the various rules are. So let's grab this procedural shader, because this will be our starting point. So I'm just going to cut and paste this shader into a new one. Where's our current shader? I'm going to create an NPR Skybox shader. I'm just going to cut and paste this. We'll call this NPR. And this shader we're going to do fairly similar to the existing one. What we are going to do is add a posterization effect to it, though. That's probably the big change we're going to make. So we're going to call it Skybox Cartoon. I'm just going to swap the sky here to use that. So the first thing is we'll just add NPR Sky Material. I'm just going to set this to our shader, which will just take a second to import. Okay, procedural cartoon. As you can see, that's the same shader we're already using, but we're going to edit it. So I'm just going to find the pixel shader, and for that you just look for the fragment. So it's usually defined as frag. As you can see here, there's a function named frag somewhere in this. Aha. Okay. So we've got the color there, but to posterize this, one of the easiest ways of doing it is rounding. So what we'll do is we'll multiply this by, say, 10, round it, then divide it by 10. So we'll do that. And that will posterize it down to 10 shades. Or actually it'll do that on each individual color shade. So that'll actually knock it down to 1,000 shades. But as you can see, we've already got that effect in place now. So I'm just going to drop that into the sky. And one of the ways we can really lock that into just one color axis is to instead use the luminance. So what I will do is I'm going to adapt this material. I've got a sky tint there, so I'm actually going to use this as a sky tint. So I'm going to take, color is in fact now going to be color dot, we have a luminance function, but I don't actually use it here. I'll just use the red channel. So I'm going to do that. So we've got our posterization effects there, and it's only using the red channel. In fact, just for the sake of this working, we'll set it to the blue channel, and then we're going to multiply that by the tint. Sky tint. And now we should have fairly precise color control over it, and we know that the Skybox net color is now being gradiented. The original source images we were working at didn't actually have that much in the way of posterization, so we may strip that back out. But this is, I think, a neat way of doing this. Is in fact our I'm going to take away the posterization, and I'm going to actually lock this to only have half the effect. So I'm going to knock away the round, which will remove the posterization. I'll remove these guys as well. You can always add them back later if we want them back. I might use the average of these color values. So I'm just going to use color.r plus color.g plus color.b and divide that by 3f to get the average, because what we're going to do next is lerp between these values. So I'm going to do half3 col2, and we're going to go between color and col2 based on the tint alpha. I believe the sky tint should be defined as a float 4, but if it's not, we'll make it 1. No, it's not. We'll just force this to use RGB values so the alpha channel can pass through unchanged. I've made a mistake. Line 396 I have done 3F. When working with C# versus shaders, you will get caught up on that one regularly. So now we should be able to control this to sort of lerp between a couple of values. So now we can produce a sky that's really sort of rich and matches what we saw in the original reference images, but we can still make something that's sort of bright and eccentric. That looks pretty good to me, actually. The sun is coming from the wrong direction. I know it's going to have some influence on our shadows. But that could lead to some nice looking effects. And it is worth keeping in mind, even in shadows like this, we can then take point lights and use those to sort of direct the scene in interesting ways. Alright, okay. So we've left a couple of bits in here, and you will need to sort of go clean these up one by one, but I think we've got the basics of what we want down. Hopefully I've got a few more buildings and things that I don't have to completely set up. Apparently I do. So the one I already used. Yep. What we could do, in fact, to make this easier is go with the global color. We can, in fact, declare these shader variables as globals using scripts. And when we do that, what we do is we tell the script system that this is a global value inherited from the scene itself. And that can save you effort if you're actually having to use the same things over and over again. The reason why I've currently got this set to an individual material is just that it does save a bit of customizability if you want to sort of modify these things later on. So I think it was 0.98, 0.52 if I remember. If we've got time for just one last modification, I think we'll do, and that's bring some trees in, because foliage can be quite tricky. So for foliage, I'm just going to grab a tree of some sort. I want probably a mesh tree here versus doing it with something else, because I'm going to write a custom Vertex animation routine, and it'll be a very quick and dirty one because we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I'm just going to try and dig out a tree that is not using the tree creator. This palm tree, it's not really quite what we're looking for, but so I've got a nicer tree in here. That looks pretty close to what I want. Okay. So I mean, this one's almost there, and this came from that pack, but we'll just follow the same process as we have before. We're going to make one modification to it. Okay. We've already got our alpha channel. Perfect. So I'm just going to convert this. And hopefully, yes, this is all one mesh. Great. Perfect. Might not be perfect actually, because actually no, we can reuse some stuff. Okay, so we'll just grab our shader there. In fact, that is perfect because we can do this. So I'm just going to grab some nice greens. Set these values to the same ones we've been using before. I should have known. There is, in fact, a separate material. Why didn't I spot that before? That's even better. Okay. So what we'll do here is we'll just set this one, because this is the tree trunk. Okay, so for this, the foliage, we've got a couple of things we need to very quickly sort out, and in fact we might be running up against time, but hopefully not, because I would like to finish this one this week. So I'm just going to go to the shader we've got, which is here. Just going to ignore that. I'm just going to save this as NPR Outline Shader Tree. We're just going to very quick cut out to this one. And I believe, if I'm correct, it's just cut off. Might need to do some double checking on this one. I'm just going to quickly load that up while that shader compiles. I'm just looking at the Unity Surface Shader docs. If I've got that right, which I might or might not have, we should be able to control. Oh, right. We should have a cut. No, that's not right. Okay, just 1 second. I think it's alpha test, in fact. One sec. Okay, what we might do is might pick this up next week, because what I'd like to do is just cover our vertex animation, specifically getting some ruffling on those leaves, and then also doing just the transparency and how we'll handle that in a photorealistic environment. But hopefully we've got a bit closer this week. I feel like we've got something that's a bit coming together, and hopefully next week we'll be able to finalize this one off. What I will also be doing next week is covering off command buffers, which are, as I said, a new feature. They're going to allow you to inject your own custom shaders into the actual rendering pipeline directly. So when the camera renders your scene, as it does now, you can actually run your own shaders during the rendering process, and that's going to give us a lot of power because we're able to inject things. What I'm going to be doing here is doing something called a Sobel filter, and a Sobel filter is just a simple sort of outline detection thing, but we're going to do this on the depth buffer, and as a result we'll get a post-effects line art effect coming out over the top, which will be superior to anything we can produce by just, for instance, flipping the mesh and adding outlines that way, which is the more common technique. This should work quite a bit better. We'll come to that next week. Thank you all for watching, and I am looking forward to seeing this sort of come to fruition.